Understanding new moons and translation days. Time can only be measured by movement. Humans relate and measure time with reference to movement. The hands of a clock moving around a clock face describe hours, minutes, and seconds. Without movement, time cannot be measured. The modern calendar is a solar calendar. On the modern calendar, weeks and months are not based on anything in nature. They are completely arbitrary. The Luni solar calendar, established by Yahweh at the creation of the world, is different. The calendar of creation is based entirely on nature. From its years to its months, from its weeks to its days, all is based on movement. The word month was originally moonth. It comes from the word moon. In ancient times, months were always based on the movement of the moon. Weeks, in turn, were divisions of the month, or lunation. The Hebrew Shabbaton was celebrated at intervals of 7 days, corresponding with changes in the moon's phases. The biggest difference between Yahweh's Luni solar calendar and the papal solar calendar in use today is found in the fact the months and weeks of the biblical calendar are also based on movement in nature. The modern calendar has months ranging in length from 28 days to 31 days. The months are not anchored to anything in nature. Consequently, the week cycles continuously and without interruption from one month to the next and from one year to the next. The Creator's calendar bases each month on the movement of the moon. Each month begins with the new moon. The week, a division of the month, restarts its cycle every new moon. The Hebrew month is a lunar month, and the quarter of this period, one phase of the moon, appears to have determined the week of 7 days. This is the hardest point to comprehend when first beginning to study the calendar of creation. The modern solar calendar has a continuous weekly cycle. The calendar of creation does not. The Sabbath, depending, in Israel's nomadic period, upon the observation of the phases of the moon, could not, according to this view, be a fixed day. New moons are important to understand because the weekly cycle restarts for the new month at new moon. In Scripture, new moon can refer to the first day of the new month, the period of time between one new moon and the next, a calendar month. Many people are confused over what to do on new moon or how to observe it, since months on the Gregorian calendar are divorced from anything in nature. Scripture reveals several things about the observance of new moon. 1. New moons were non-commerce days. 2. New moons were days of thanksgiving. And 3. New moons were days of worship. Non-commerce days. When in apostasy, the Jews resented having to close their stores for Sabbaths and new moons. The Bible records the lament of these greedy merchants. When will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit? Work done for the tabernacle, however, was allowable. The tabernacle of Moses was assembled on a new moon day. However, no work that generated income, no commerce, was to be performed on new moon, nor any other routine labor that could be performed on other days. Days of Thanksgiving. New moons were a time for families to get together, share a meal, and rejoice over the blessings of the past month, rededicating themselves to Yahweh for the new. Worship days. Where Scripture is silent, history can shed additional light. An early edition of the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia states that new moons were originally days for worship. The new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent upon the lunar cycle. Both date back to the nomadic period of Israel. Originally, the new moon was celebrated in the same way as the Sabbath. Gradually, it became less important, while the Sabbath became more a day of religion and humanity, of religious meditation and instruction, of peace and delight of the soul. Translation days have no direct correlation in the modern solar calendar. However, it is necessary to understand what they are in order to have a clear comprehension of Yahweh's calendar. Translation Day is an astronomical term, not found in Scripture. However, the fact the biblical months were based on the cycles of the moon is sufficient proof they exist in the biblical calendar. Astronomically, a lunation is 29.5 days long. A lunation never has less than 29 days or more than 30 days. Astronomers use the term Translation Day to designate the 30th day of a lunation. It falls at the end of a lunar cycle on the black moon, when the moon cannot be seen. Time itself is continuous. Because it is, many have believed the system by which time is calculated must also be continuous. This is incorrect. Originally, all ancient calendars were luni-solar, with an interrupted weekly cycle. The weekly cycle restarted at the beginning of the month, lunation, or at the beginning of the year, following 5 intercalated days that closed the previous year. These 5 intercalary days were not part of any weekly cycle. All time must be accounted for. Thus, translation days are not non-days. They have a date, the 30th of every 30-day month. The 30th of the month, like the first of the month, was not part of the 7-day weekly cycle. However, it was counted and did have a date. Confusion over translation days has led some people to reject the biblical lunisolar calendar. The 4th commandment clearly states, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of Yahweh thy Elohim. Not understanding translation days had led to the false assumption that in a 30-day month there are a total of 8 days between the last Sabbath of one month and the next Sabbath of the new month. This appears to create a problem because 8 days is no longer than the 6 workday interval between Sabbaths prescribed in the 4th commandment. However, because new moons are a type of holy day, there are never more than 6 workdays between worship days. The assumption there will be too many workdays between Sabbaths comes from not understanding the new moon itself is a worship day that starts a new cycle of 4 weeks. In the time of the earliest prophets, the new moon stood in the same line with another lunar observance, the Sabbath. The new moon begins the new weekly cycle for the new month, so translation days are not part of that weekly cycle, even though they are a day with a date. Translation days are always the 30th on a lunar month. They can never be transferred to the next month or counted as a date in the new month because the next month always starts with New Moon Day, the day following Translation Day. With the new moon, a new cycle of 4 weeks begins. Yahweh has always clearly specified by name or date which days are to be kept holy. Thus, all days not specifically designated as holy days are work days. The Gregorian solar calendar has different categories of days: weekdays, weekends, when most people take off work, and national holidays. The biblical calendar has 3 categories of worship days: 1. Weekly, Seventh-day Sabbaths; 2. Monthly, new moons; 3. Annual, yearly feasts. Many people convicted to worship by the biblical calendar keep the weekly and yearly observances, but the monthly observance of new moon is frequently overlooked. This is partly through ignorance of how to observe the new moon. However, the importance of new moons can be seen in the fact the sacrifices prescribed for new moons were considerably more than those prescribed for the weekly seventh-day Sabbath. The sacrifices required for the seventh-day Sabbath were simply the 2 lambs offered every day, plus 2 additional lambs and a small food and drink offering. The sacrifices for new moons included 2 young bullocks, a ram, and 7 lambs, plus a sizable food and drink offering, plus the 2 lambs offered every day. Under the Old Covenant system of sacrifice, the priests burnt a morning and an evening sacrifice every single day. Yahweh specified which sacrifices were to be offered on which days. The average daily sacrifice was a lamb. Larger, more expensive sacrifices were offered on the yearly feasts. If days were to be ranked based on the type of sacrifice specified for that day, it would be from least to most important: 4. Everyday workdays; 3. Weekly seventh-day Sabbaths; 2. New moons; 1. Annual feasts. All of creation was designed to reveal truths about the Creator and to draw the hearts and minds of man to his Creator in grateful acknowledgement. The calendar devised by Yah is divinely designed for that very thing. The seventh-day weekly Sabbath is to be set apart for the worship of the Creator. But it was not just the weekly Sabbaths that were to be set apart. Originally, the monthly new moons, in addition to the yearly feasts, were all times to remember the goodness of the Creator. Yahweh's holy convocations, including new moons, are times for renewed commitment to the Creator, and times to slow down, acknowledge the Father's gifts of family, friends, and other blessings. New moons brings a blessing to all who will set aside this time to acknowledge the blessings of Yahweh. This feast will be kept throughout all eternity, as the saved rejoice in the endless blessings of the loving Creator. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith Yahweh.